Nogi black belt absolute, me heavier this time. I do a sloppy takedown attempt to get on my side and back to turtle. I basically was in guard for a split second, so this allows me to be able to do the sweep if I get on top. Opponent goes around. This allows me to get underneath and catch his leg. I always do this pull, actually sloppy pull, to lure my opponent in, and I rely on my good defense in turtle. Look, right, my arm is right now underneath his leg. This is basically a deep half guard version, but on top. Once my arm is underneath like this, even if my opponent gets a second hook inside, it can never be countered as a back take. I call this position the fireman. It's actually covered on my instructional offensive defense, back defense with someone on your back. See how I stuff this leg? This is to defend his armbar attempt. Normally now I could pass on the right side. I was late. My opponent goes to triangle. I could rely on the king's gambit, but my opponent defends well, and I end up in over-under. And then now I start to transition to the mermaid. You can see the link on top with the link to the mermaid pass. Now my goal is to get my left leg underneath his bottom leg to close the mermaid. You will see my opponent defend well by anticipated, and we'll see what happens next. So now I'm trying to flatten my opponent out or make him rotate to his belly and get my left leg underneath. If I go too soon, I end up in a leg lock attack. So look, now I go underneath. My opponent turns too far. So I managed, he actually brings me on bottom, but I managed to transition to the back. This was anticipated. So now I have the right arm underneath. My opponent's goal now initially was to turn to his belly. Okay, switch sides. Now it's very important for me. This is my off side. So I need actually to be on my underhook side, so on the right side, to be able to finish him safely. So look, here I'm still keeping my connection with my head and trying to rotate my left shoulder underneath. My opponent's best chance now is to get his right shoulder on the mat. And I prevent this with my left arm below his head and my left shoulder turning underneath. My legs also play a part. I always keep a foot to knee connection to make sure my opponent cannot just pry my feet open with his hands. Look how I counter rotate. My opponent still tries to get his shoulder to the floor. Okay, now I'm on my good side. Now it's hard to finish this side, but from here you can set up the finish on the left side. So this is a very important moment now going on. My right shoulder is deep underneath. I have a right underhook. This stops my opponent from easily rotating to the right side and turtling. At the same time, my inside rotation also works in the favor of preventing the turtle, and it also prevents his left shoulder going underneath. You see me take my left arm for a split second now just now. That was to distract him for a bit. Now, the problem is a bit with attacks. Every attack you do allows him to get out, so I actually rely on his escape. Now here, look. I actually thought I had him here. It was quite deep sunk in. Notice my legs. I have to keep my legs crossed and block his hips so he cannot rotate fully out. Opponent managed to defend with his grips, but it's just a matter of time. Now I got it deep again. So my opponent here was actually quite sturdy, considering he was lighter than me, and he did a very good job of defending. By rotating, my opponent rotating to the right side again, I have to follow. This alleviates the pressure, but I still have good control. Do notice how I keep my legs all the time crossed. The one who said never to cross your legs on the back, well, he was wrong. It's important not to cross them in the middle, of course, for footlock reasons, but this is really the way to control. Now my arm is deeper. It's not a perfect choke, but it's a good dilemma on my opponent. Either let me crank his neck or look at the choke. My opponent chooses to tap in this case.